Welcome to The Disruptors, the show where we get the most interesting folks to talk about the big picture future. Today, we've got August Bradley, Futurist podcaster, and Half Machine on the program to talk about his future, our future, and so much more. This is part of a two-part series that we're doing between The Disruptors and Mind and Machine, and you can check out his. We'll have links in the show notes. Just hop on over to disruptors.fm or Mind and Machine. But thanks for coming today, August.
Thanks, Matt. I'm excited to be here. I really enjoyed our previous conversation where you really looked at human enhancement, and I'm excited to dive into a much broader range of topics here with you.
Yeah, and if you're going to live longer, then you probably got time to listen to both of these guys. So I would recommend doing it. August, give me a quick rundown. What's your 30,000-foot view of who the heck you are?
Wow, that's quite a perspective. But I am first and foremost, just a really curious person. I have one of those minds, much like yours, I can tell, where I get a little thread of information and I just want to know more. And when you look at the kind of topics that we look at, it's just endless what you can learn and discover. So I'm a curious person, and that drives pretty much everything I do. Day job is I do consulting and a lot of automation and efficiency consulting with leading edge companies. But my passion project has been Mind and Machine, and that has been the avenue through which I most passionately explore my curiosities. So like you, I talk with fascinating people and just learn so much from people just pushing the boundaries in every conceivable direction. So that is what fires me up every day, both working with clients who are also pushing boundaries, but really looking at the outer end of human potential across all these different fields just fires me up every morning. And that's what I am motivated most by.
Why human potential?
Well, I mean, we all want to get the most out of our time here on Earth. And who knows what, if anything, comes after that. But what we know is that we have this really unique and incredible and extraordinary opportunity right now here. And I mean, if you think about it, the astronomical odds of us even being alive here is just mind-blowing. So not to take the absolute most advantage of that is just a waste. So I am committed, like a lot of us, in enhancing ourselves as much as possible to achieve the goals that we've set out for ourselves. But also I'm fascinated by what future generations will be capable of and the limits that they'll shatter, and just the mind-blowing potential of what humans will ultimately be capable of just really fires me up.
I think it's interesting that you brought up we don't know what happens next. I know I read an Ian Banks book, and it was semi-dystopian in that there was essentially a clash, a war between post-human civilizations, some of which believed you should create a virtual reality hell, and some of which you believed you should just have virtual reality. And it was as a way to incentivize people to live better in the here and now. And do you think we'll move towards something like that, as we have the ability to do that? You die and get uploaded into something else.
I don't know about in terms of a post life or in terms of transforming what we perceive as reality in this life.
This was a post life, but I don't suppose you had to be dead to get into it, so it's kind of one and the same.
Yeah, I'm more skeptical about the post life scenarios. I mean, obviously, there's just no way of knowing, given the available information. I do believe that there will be opportunities in virtual reality that just shatter our preconceived notions of what reality is, that make us radically rethink reality itself. And I know virtual reality is now in the trough of disillusionment after an excessively exuberant hype cycle. And a lot of people have really given up on it. I haven't. I just think it's a lot further off, probably at least 20, maybe 30 years out. I mean, who knows? You're just picking numbers when you're anticipating the timeline. But I do think we'll see a virtual reality that is so lifelike, that is nearly indistinguishable from reality. And when we see that, then viscerally, we are really going to question reality. It's one thing to hear a simulation theory right now and go, yeah, that's an interesting thought experiment. But we don't feel it as potentially true. At least I don't. I don't think most people. I think that's pretty easily dismissed because it just feels so wrong. But when you go into a virtual reality that is so lifelike, you're going to really question which side's more real than the other. And I think that is a possibility. But I think we're going to have some kind of base life to go into the virtual reality. And I just have no preconceived notions on what that after life might be. So I'm kind of skeptical on whether there even is one, but I'm open to the idea. You have to always consider the possibility.
Yeah, that's what marks the difference between science and, well, belief. We had a really interesting episode with Don Hoffman. He actually believes that all of reality that we see isn't a simulation, but it's a simplification of a much bigger reality. Because if you see too much detail, you get stuck in the weeds. If you see too little detail, you die. So he believes that basically what we're seeing is not the world as it is, and it's a really interesting, really popular episode. So if you guys haven't checked that out, go to disruptors.fm, check out Don Hoffman.
Yeah,
But
and
I think
funny
the
timing. We actually have an episode with Don coming out in about a week or so.
oh,
So
you do, yeah, it's
we're gonna be building on some of those ideas.
the argument against reality. It's a
Exactly.
fascinating thing. I don't totally agree with him, but I do think there's definitely something there.
But what's
Do you
powerful, I
think?
think, about his thinking though, is that he just shatters the default assumption that virtually everybody has. And the approach of discarding our preconceived notions, I think, is a powerful starting place. And I think he's really good at starting a conversation beyond our base assumptions.
Yeah, he basically hits you with psychedelics, but on the math side of things, as opposed to the drug side of things. It's
Right.
interesting to examine reality in a different way. Do you think we will get to that point where we have VR that is so indistinguishable? I mean, at that point, will we have a splintering of society? People that want to live in VR, people that don't, people that are locked in jail that we just pop them in that because it's cheaper and easier?
Right. Well, I guess we have to define when I say virtually or nearly indistinguishable. I think it will. I can't imagine a time where it's literally not distinguishable. I mean, that's when you talk hundreds of years out, it's impossible to speculate. But in the foreseeable future, no. But I think it will become so close. I don't know how much you've done with VR, but it's the very few really good experiences, you feel it viscerally. And this is in the current iterations are pretty crude. First of all, it's only sight and sound, and the sight is very pixelated still. And we just need more rendering power. We need the ability to do foveon rendering where it's high resolution just in the direction you look. And it's quite a ways away. Even the people who really believe it tend to, I think they overestimate what's going to happen quickly. I just think it's 20, 30 years before it really gets compelling enough. But I do think you're going to see people who spend the majority of their workday in VR, a lot of people, like large portions of the population, because it'll be so productive in terms of what can be crafted as a work environment, and it'll eliminate your need to be anywhere for certain types of work. And you can create environments where the tools are more readily available, and much like Don talks about, where you have an interface that facilitates, the primary objective, in that case survival, but in this case the work objectives. So you can actually craft an environment designed just to get the job done more efficiently and more effectively, and to sort of immerse yourself in it. So I think it will be close enough that you will viscerally feel it as real, and that your
How
mind
close do you
will
have to
close the
get
gap.
though? So let's play devil's advocate. How many kids sit on their computer or they play video games and you go for 8 hours and you have no idea where in God's name the time went? I know I did a VR experience in Zurich and it was heads up goggles, you had a vest, you had gloves, and you had boots. And there was this thing. We went up in an elevator and suddenly we were on the second or third floor and I had to walk across the top of Roman columns. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
scared of heights and I was shitting myself, and it didn't look anything real. I looked like a Halo trooper from some video game. It certainly wasn't high def resolution. None of that mattered. The
Mm-hmm.
only thing that mattered is you associating yourself with whatever that thing was and feeling like you were there.
Right.
So, do we have to get to that? Or is, as long as we have lag free interactions, is that enough?
You don't have to get all the way there to have it be a very compelling experience, and there are already very compelling experiences. I don't think there are consistently a large volume of them out there, but there are some. Like the best ones are really powerful, viscerally, like I said. And yeah, the whole trick of the height scare in VR is real. You feel it. I've seen people doing there's an experience where you're rock climbing, and I've seen people like lunge for a reach that's, just it requires a physical lunge in the VR environment. And these people will do that lunge completely forgetting that they're in a virtual environment, and they will fall on their face without the instinctive reflex of putting their arms up to break their fall, because their mind is in the virtual space. That reflex is not a conscious decision. It's an instinctive decision. So it's actually fooled the subconscious, innate reflexes that we have. So yeah, you're right. It doesn't need to be all the way there, but I'm talking about the point where you're questioning reality. And I think we need to be a lot closer. I don't think you have to be all the way there, but I think you have to be a lot closer to the point where large groups of the population really question the nature of reality on a really visceral level. I don't think we're anywhere close to that.
Do you think that's doable on a wearable basis, or will this be a plug-in, we're going to hook it into your brain type deal,
It'll
or some type of inception?
probably some kind of connection to the neural pathways, because it has to be more than just sight and sound. And wearing exoskeletons and gloves and treadmills is pretty crude. So I'm skeptical that will really get us there. But I think once we really start tapping into like internal neural pathways, then there's no limit on what you can do in terms of tricking your senses.
I feel like a treadmill's crude. I did it in the middle of an empty warehouse. And if you had haptics, then some of the stuff I know, I've seen some really interesting folks working on creating sixth senses,
Mm.
where you have, for instance, a blind person seeing. They're wearing a vest, and on their vest it has little haptic sensors that are doing little shocks, primarily on the back and torso, because you have lots of space, lots of nerves, and
Right.
there's not much going on. But you can train blind people to see by
Mhm.
having different patterns zap across their body, and suddenly those type of things become real. It's interesting as we start to
Yeah.
explore additional senses, so to
Well,
speak.
it is fascinating how the mind can close the gap with even with what's available now. And to your point, it feels super real in many cases because your mind is really good at extrapolating a small subset of sensory impulses into the full-blown immersive sensation. And you get your mind thinking in that right direction, just like a good storyteller. But when you start bringing electronic haptics into it, you have like the vest that pulsates and gloves that have sensations that can actually simulate heat and cold very precisely, and some external actual analog sensory triggers as well. It is powerful, yeah. And that's just with today's relatively crude technology, although it's far better than it was in the 90s. Every generation we get a lot closer to that goal of total immersion, but it will have to be a lot more than just sight and sound. You're going to have some tactile haptic feedback as well to facilitate that full acceptance of this as another reality. Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't have feeling in your fingertips, you can't write.
Yeah.
You just even trying to pick up a pen and write, it doesn't work
Right. And so much
because
of what we pick up is not, we're focused on someone's words, but we're picking up so much more from the environment, from the body language, from, computer scientists are working hard at natural language interfaces, because that communicates so much more than the thing we're mentally focused on. Even though our mind is focused more on one spot, we're just collecting from a wide range of senses.
speaking of collecting from a wide range, what technology or trend are you most excited about and why?
Well, on a personal level, I'm most excited about space exploration. Like that's the thing that captures my imagination more than anything. And it may not be the most practical, application of time or energy right now, but it is the thing. Like ever since I was, I'm a huge fan of Carl Sagan's, and he started that love for what's beyond, the potential of what's out there beyond the known of human boundaries. And so when I think about what's possible in biotech, what's possible in VR, it all started with what's possible beyond the known boundaries of space. And when you start thinking about the possibilities, obviously I'm a huge science fiction fan, as I know you are too, and that sparks a lot of the dreaming and wonder. But space gets me most excited. But I think there are things more practical. I think in a shorter term time span, I think the potential to radically transform healthcare in terms of AI and machine learning, catching things that nobody ever would have caught in terms of diagnosis, is going to just alleviate so much unnecessary human suffering. So I think that's radically transformative in a closer time frame. I think food sciences is going to very quickly enhance, it's going to reduce the environmental demands of our food industry. And more interestingly, we're going to be able to really design foods that are super healthy for us, that are more efficient and more capable of giving us things we need. The problem is we're in an environment, a capitalistic environment, which I am very much supportive of, but the incentive systems in that environment motivate development of foods not for the purpose of health optimization, but rather for profit optimization, which is more about shelf life and things that make it easier to produce and transport and sell. But I don't see any reason why we can't apply those same technologies ultimately to making healthier foods and food products that are healthier for the environment. So excited about that. I could talk about in pretty much any direction. I'm excited about so many different things, but those are a few right there.
So space, what would it take for you to take a free ticket?
Well, ironically enough, even though I am super curious and passionate about what's out there, I am not inclined to be an early adopter in terms of space flight. That is some high risk activity right there. And while I have huge respect and admiration for astronauts and people who do that, even civilians who will be the first to go, I will definitely not be one of the early ticket buyers. Part of the passion I have for these things is a passion for life, right? If you're curious and you just want to be learning, you got to stay healthy and alive.
Killed the cat. Yeah.
Mission number one. So it would take a lot to get me to buy a ticket. It would have to be a well-developed, well-established routine activity. Now I could see. That's in terms of like going to Mars, right? That just seems so speculative. I could see settlements on the moon being well established, and if it's a regular commercial activity and there are bases, and this has been done a lot, yeah, I think that'd be awesome. But definitely not an early adopter in terms of actual space travel. But there's so much we can do in terms of exploration of outer space that doesn't require even any humans going there. I mean, robotics will be able to do so much in space in terms of learning and discovering. We're already doing that. And we've just scratched the surface of what robots and sensors are capable of. So we're going to be expanding that technology and shooting all of that in space much further than humans will be able to go. It's, as soon as we get humans out to the moon, we'll have robotic tools far, far further than that. We get to Mars, it'll be that much further that we'll be sending probes and sensors. So I'm more interested in the learning, what we can discover, than physically experiencing. Although ultimately we can send these robotic sensors out there and create VR and AR experiences that give us a taste of what it's like out there. So I think combining the technologies but keeping us safe is the optimal path.
You could also kind of call that teasing. Here's what you can see but never quite touch. That's we'll see.
Again, you got to stay alive if you're going to enjoy it. So
I know, it's funny. You see so much sci-fi and they've got all these bases on all of these planets. A lot of times it doesn't really make sense to make a base on a planet because you're getting out of gravity just to go back into it. And a lot of times it doesn't make sense to send a human unless you're just going from an ego sense. A robot could probably do the job better.
Yeah, I think bases will be for mining and extraction, commercial resource collection, and then for bases to then send things off further beyond that. So I think the missions to Mars will use in some capacity bases on the moon, for example.
Yeah, it makes sense. What I meant is more put the base in space, and then you kind of
right. Okay, so we get into Isaac Arthur's megastructures, and those are mind-blowingly interesting.
Yeah, there's so many interesting ways to do it, and it would probably be cheaper, easier, and safer to do it if you left it in space.
For sure.
But that's
whole
nother can of worms.
I dove deep into that with our mutual friend Isaac Arthur in our megastructures episode. And in a lot of cases, it's in many ways, he makes the point that it's easier to build an environment hospitable to humans than to adapt a planet or a moon to be hospitable to humans. So I think you're right. I think that is very likely to be a the path we go. Although if you're launching missiles off of it or launching spacecraft off of it, you might need something more solid than what we're currently capable of building in terms of an independent structure. So that can change over time.
You probably wouldn't need to do anything. You could probably just give it a little kick, gets away from you, and then
Let
you
it float.
launch. Yeah,
We
let
need
it
speed.
whatever floats your boat, and yeah, but then you kick off once you're already in space.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you need some type of thrusterless drive, electromagnetic drive, etc. It's interesting. Space is one of those ones. What I like is I typically get up pretty early, at least on a normal person perspective. Usually leaving by around 6:30, 7 to head to the Starbucks office, so to speak. But it's nice when it's dark out and you can look up in the night sky and it's a clear one and you see all those stars and it's like, damn.
Yeah.
And I would encourage everyone out there to go have your oh damn moment. Just to go out and look up into the stars and you get that sense of wonder and possibility. That's something that we miss on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. The more you start looking, the more of those moments you're going to have. It just takes some curiosity and just a small effort to look into a direction that's totally unknown to generate those moments of, wow, what could possibly be out there? And you start extrapolating and you start learning. The more you learn about anything, the more interesting it becomes. And when you start looking beyond the bounds of human knowledge, it gets you excited in so many ways. Totally agree, Matt.
It does. And with healthcare, I'm excited. Amazon's starting to hop in there. Maybe we can fix the US system a little bit by bringing some type of efficiency to it.
Yes, I actually saw an article today that Facebook is developing things for healthcare.
Yeah, but no one's gonna trust Zuckerberg.
Which is
For
about
God's
to say,
sakes, guys, don't make that mistake.
Exactly where I was about to go. I mean, of all companies, I think they have lost the trust, the public trust. Yet they have not lost the public activity.
They want to put these devices in your home to watch you. Zuckerberg's got his camera covered. They want to do dating. Good Lord. I don't want to give Facebook any type of information.
Well, I won't put an Amazon listening device in my home, let alone a Facebook.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't put any of them personally because I don't trust any of them, and they're all incentivized to lie right now. I'll collect what they can and apologize later because it's not like they're going to have to pay for it.
Right. I have the same impulse. I do have one in my office. And it's more so I have something to test with, but not in my home. No.
Yeah, I understand that. So we talked about the one side of the sword, but every technology is a double-edged sword. What technologies or trends are you most worried about and why? Let's play scare tactics.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of the technologies that I'm most excited about because they have such radically transformative potential, I'm also the most fearful of because that radically transformative potential, can do an equal or more amount of harm. But if you want to, cut to the chase, the things in the reasonably near future that I'm most concerned about is the incredible vulnerability of our urban infrastructures. We're already so dependent on AI processes and algorithms to run things for us, which is great because it makes it easier, it makes it less expensive, it reduces errors. I mean, it's good in so many ways, but the complexity of running an electrical grid, a waste removal system, traffic systems is already very complex, and it's getting so much more complex that we're becoming completely dependent on these systems. Even our work days are so dependent on phones and the internet. Can you imagine going to work for any extended amount of time without the internet? I'd be shut down.
Could you imagine going to a grocery store?
No, I can't. I can't imagine doing anything.
It is scary.
These grids are so vulnerable to attack, first and foremost, but even just internal errors and collapses on their own. And while on a day-to-day basis, they remove errors, when an error happens, it has the potential to be catastrophic. People's lives are dependent on delivery systems now, and these delivery systems run by algorithms. And it's not that these systems are going to turn on us. There's no killer AI. There's no, evil AI mind. But the complexity is so vast, no human being can comprehend it and wrap their mind around it and operate it. So we've let these systems take over. But I don't think there are a lot of safety and backup systems in place should something have a catastrophic failure. And that makes them the most obvious targets for bad actors. And given that I don't think there are many bad actors in society that would do such a thing, it only takes one. So I think there's an incredible vulnerability to these huge infrastructure systems being run by algorithms. And that's dangerous. Privacy is only going to get worse. It's already bad, the privacy exposure. But, if you think it's bad now, wait till every device is a smart device and everything is connected to the cloud and the internet, and every action and every the level of again dependency, but also the level of data collection is as bad as and extreme as it is now. It's going to be radically more so in 10, 15, 20 years. So everything you take out of the refrigerator is going to be measured, like every little thing. And so the privacy thing just gets worse. I'm also fascinated. Here's another good and bad. I'm fascinated with brain machine interfaces, right? There's so much you can do. Language is such a limiting factor in expressing ourselves. It's slow, it's cumbersome, it's imprecise. There's so much we can do with other forms of, connectivity in terms, and also just things that we're not even conscious of. We can learn about ourselves so much with machines monitoring in deeper ways. But my God, think about the privacy violation when your mind is connected to a machine which is connected to the cloud. Again, double-edged sword.
Sorry, August, you were having depressive thoughts last night. We're going to increase your premium by $4.7 today.
But if I was really having depressive thoughts, say someone's suicidal, to take it to an extreme, that could be really helpful. That could save someone's life. But yeah, at what trade-off?
It depends on how the information's used, and especially how the information and businesses are regulated. Because there are going to be things a la climate change, a la health and privacy, where it's not, they're going to be the collective action problems of our future. And to solve for that, when we have 1,000, 1,000,000 times more data, when your smart car is driving you around and communicating everywhere that you're going. Oh, look, this guy came to the crime scene and stopped for a second. Was he looking at it, or was he the guy that just shot him in the head?
Right.
It's going to be super interesting as we move towards what feels like an inevitable Minority Report.
Yeah. And inevitably, I think with that comes ratings. Not that they're going to be publicly out there like in the Black Mirror episode, but I think it will be hard for governments, for corporations to resist. And we already do it, of course, with credit reports, but rating people based on their behavior. And when you have this much monitoring of people's behavior, you can get a pretty precise rating for whatever it is you want to evaluate someone for. And I don't know, that feels wrong and invasive to me, but I don't think there's any avoiding it when the information is there and the use of such a tool is so valuable for certain objectives. I don't know how you get governments and corporations not to do that. We know companies already do that, but the scale and precision with which they'll be able to do it will just be so extreme that I think there are very legitimate concerns and dangers surrounding that.
Especially because it's easier to play offense than it is to play defense.
Absolutely.
So it's not like you can protect your own data.
Right. And you're talking about regulations protecting people, but the regulations lag, right? They're responsive to moves that feel out of what should be right, but there are no laws stopping them, at least for a long time. And then many of them become normalized, right? So a lot of them just become part of, oh yeah, well, of course that happens. Things that we do now would have been shocking 40, 30, 20 years ago in terms of privacy violations.
What scares me the most is the 9/11 effect of every single little thing that happens. Governments, especially the US government, seizes any type of power they can have. When would taking off your shoes be considered normal? When would people rubbing devices all over you be considered normal? When would confiscating cell phones and putting malware on them be considered normal? Well, it's Homeland Security, and that's just the status quo.
Right, but and I agree. I completely agree with you that those excuses are exploited. But at the same time, the power of one individual who wants to do harm is already extreme, and it's going to be so much more extreme. How do you stop that?
You kill everyone, because that's really the only way you stop it. Because think about it. Yeah. Every incident that happens will be a slightly further encroachment on a slippery slope that leads one direction.
Hmm.
How do you stop that one thing? Well, you create the perfect utopia. What's the metaphor? What's a utopia also known as? A dystopia, because there's no difference. They've done studies where
Mm.
they give people options between today's world and they kind of make it a little bit less obvious, but basically several different utopias, all the ones they could come up with in today's world. And inevitably, almost everyone chooses today's world because a utopia is essentially just a dystopia.
Well, you look at some of the great literary fiction from A Brave New World to Infinite Jest, and they paint that same picture. The thing that is so alluring to us creates, we get it, and that creates the dystopia consistently.
Yeah, because you take the challenge out of the life. And that's why
Right,
Terminator had the world not too easy and still
right,
it
right.
fell.
You take the
It's
life out of the life.
yeah, you take the
Yeah,
life out of living. It's it's a curious question to ponder.
absolutely. But one that is important to ponder, because when we get new things that seem just awesome and remarkable, amazing new forms of entertainment or amazing new conveniences or luxuries, we have not been good at thinking about what the other side what the other side of that coin might be. And I think now that we see the power of these technologies, we've been burned enough times, I think we need to start thinking more carefully when we see something that's appealing. What are we trading for it? What's the cost? Because when Facebook and these social medias came out, they seemed all upside. It didn't seem like they'd be problematic. I think the founders were caught off guard in many ways. I don't think they expected them to do the harm they've done in terms of election meddling and these kinds of things. We just didn't think about it. But we've been burned enough times. I don't think going forward there are any excuses to not anticipate flip sides of things that seem very shiny and alluring up front.
I would say that's true and false because you're never going to get a founder to try to build something if they think they might be destroying the world in the process. People that are building something are inherently optimistic, otherwise they're not willing to go through the shithole of building it.
Right. But what are they optimistic about? Is it the financial return, or is it really about improving the world? And there's probably a mix, and it will vary. The ratio will vary from person to person. But I think as consumers, like, those things only succeed if we buy them, if we choose to make them a part of our lives. So there's a responsibility for the founders, but there's also a responsibility for us, the consumers. And we need to think about these things and have more substantive discussions about these types of transformations earlier in their release cycle.
How do we do that when people are so busy with themselves, not to mention Facebook and Netflix,
It's really hard.
both of which are kind of like the lighting up of today?
Yeah. Well, I mean, no, it's really hard. It's hard. We're super busy, and there's also so many of these things, right? There's so many of them. And that's the nature of a shiny and alluring thing, is that it's shiny and alluring. So you want it, you want to try it. People are talking about it. You want to be in the conversation. There's a social currency to be using the thing that everybody's talking about, to be in that, especially when the thing itself is a discussion platform. It's hard not to, but I think we need to think very deliberately about what we're willing to put out there information wise, how we're willing to spend our time. And it all starts with thinking about what are our goals in life? Like, what do each of us individually want to achieve? Do we want to build something meaningful? Do we want to foster relationships? Or do we want to be, accumulating likes and followers?
Do you think
So,
most people are thinking at that level though? I
no,
would say a lot of people, if you're struggling to get by, you're probably not thinking at that level. If you're short on cash, your IQ is 10 points lower than it would be if you were doing okay. And
right.
if you're stressed, short on sleep, not liking your job, how often do you get the chance to escape that and come to the thought processes of, is this actually what I want or what do I want? I feel like a lot of people, unfortunately, I feel like everyone at times, but a lot of people sometimes fall into the trap of, well, now I brush my teeth, and after I brush my teeth, I spit in the sink, and after I spit in the sink, I take my nightly pee. And people get stuck in this routine that they don't question because the routine is what
Right.
gets them through the day.
Right. And I'm super sympathetic to that. And the vast majority of people are in that circumstance. So there are a number of things. One is, I'm not blaming anyone who does that. In fact, I do that all the time. All of us do. But if we're going to anticipate problems in our society and things that are negative influences on our lives, we have to make the effort. So many people won't. I'm just saying, if you want to be on top of technology, and instead of having technology on top of you, then you need to make the effort. It's just a decision each person needs to make. And yeah, and there's many people in circumstances that make that decision and that make that practice and even awareness of the need to do that much more difficult. I mean, the people who listen to our shows tend to be people who have a lot more choices in life and have achieved a certain level of both luxury and a luxury in terms of the ability to spend time contemplating elevated ideas and possibilities in the future, right? That's a luxury that a lot of people don't have. I'm very sympathetic to that. But at the same time, we as a society and each of us as individuals have to make an effort if we're going to get the best possible outcome. I don't think the default outcome tends to be the best outcome, especially with these new technologies. I think we can achieve really good outcomes if we're very deliberate and intentional about it. If we know what we want out of life, both individually and as groups, and then we evaluate the potential and the way you use it against those goals. If you don't, I think you get certainly a subpar outcome, but in many cases a negative outcome. Right, most people aren't going to do that. Although there's nothing wrong with encouraging people to do that and to try to do it yourself. So we do what we can, individually and as collectives.
I want a bold contrarian 10-year prediction, something you believe that most around you wouldn't.
I already gave you one bold contrarian prediction with the VR. VR is pretty down right now, but I don't think it's 10 years.
Yeah.
I don't think that's 10 years. I think that this is sort of a take on AI consciousness. And I think this is an early precursor, which is why I think it's contrarian, because I think most people suspect or are skeptical of this idea of conscious AIs. But I think within a 10-year period, we're going to start to see AIs putting together these digital footprints that we have. And again, these digital footprints are already significant. And by that, I mean, maps tracking where we go, everything we put online, credit card transactions tracked, literally every interaction that's captured in some digital form. That's going to radically increase. And I think within a 10-year period, the footprint will be so dense and rich from a data extraction standpoint that machine learning and AIs are going to be able to animate that and in a number of different ways and basically create digital twins. But I think one of the most interesting applications of that will be when you have someone who's passed away, you can create an avatar of that person based on their past behaviors, including biometrics. What made their heart rate speed up? What kinds of things were they passionate and most alive about? And you will be able to, within 10 years, start to animate AIs or avatars through AI technology, using all of this patterns from a person's life, all this data, pattern data, and create an animated version of that person that others can interact with. And I think it'll be super powerful and really, really creepy, and it'll scare some people. Won't want anything to do with that, and some people are so hungry for some connection to that person who passed on that it will be irresistible and become a part of their lives. Of course, that goes beyond people who have passed away. It's going to be viable entirely for living people, and you're going to start to have digital twins out there. And these digital twins initially will be designed to do things for you, to work on your behalf. But over time, there's the potential for them to take on their own objectives and then perhaps become rivals in some sort. I started thinking down these lines in a conversation with Grace Scott, a futurist, and I've really extrapolated it in a lot of directions. I think in 10 years, this can start to become a viable thing. And of course, it'll only take on more power beyond that. But it's really the early forms of a kind of consciousness in machines. And while it will seem like consciousness. And while the machine may not be conscious, and I don't think it actually will be, your perception of machines with consciousness will just take on a whole nother level. Like we were talking about VR becoming this visceral questioning of reality. I think the same will be happening there in terms of machine consciousness and people starting to think of machines as conscious.
I would have two things to add. A, it'll be super dangerous when we start doing that with people that die, because life is nothing without death. If you don't have the grieving, then you're not actually getting over it. Yep. And then on the flip side of things, I think we will attribute consciousness much earlier than it necessarily feels or looks like consciousness. People are already, I mean, they're already petting robot dogs. They're already making sure that they don't mess with the Roomba. I think we're going to get to a situation where it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck. We're probably going to assume it's a duck. And that's going to be problematic because we don't actually know if it thinks about itself or it feels like a
Yeah.
duck. And I think the same thing will happen with humans. So the problem becomes not whether or not it's conscious, it's whether or not it's conscious. We'll assume it's conscious. So how
Hmm.
will we treat it?
Right.
If we don't treat it with rights, that's slavery, regardless of what it feels. And if we do treat it with rights, and this is some type of transition, we go from having free workers, i.e., slaves, to not having slaves, and the economy crashes.
And what
So
does it say
it
about
creates.
us if we treat it inhumanly, yet we perceive it as being conscious?
Oh, it that says the Westworld thing that we're all down to rape and pillage. It's all good as long
Right.
as we come out on top. That doesn't say good things. And I
Right.
know I've heard parents, I've heard other people on the podcast say some of the things they hear things they hear their kids say to their phones or to robots, etc. It's like, good God, did that just come out of his mouth?
Right.
And I think it does create a weird, perverse incentive, especially as we have those digital twins, and those digital twins get into the digital oldest business in history, prostitution.
Which is if you have the twin, it's an inevitable direction. Although I wasn't necessarily thinking of a form. I was thinking of still screen interfaces. But ultimately, you get to the Black Mirror episode where you have an android-like form attached to the AI behavior, and that gets even freakier. But to your first point on it being dangerous, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it'll be dangerous to our psyche and to our psychological, how we think about ourselves in the world. But that I don't see that stopping it. I don't see that as a deterrent. That's the kind of, especially, it's not an obvious danger up front to most people. I think you're
We
unusually
think we're
forward
strong
thinking.
enough. We
But
think we're strong enough to avoid it, but we
yeah,
won't be.
it'll only be in retrospect that we see the harm, and by then it'll be too late in many cases.
It will be. And if we're all in love with robots, there's our Fermi paradox right there. No one's making babies. Or
There we
maybe
go.
they're going straight to IVF, but that's our other conversation. If you guys didn't check it out yet, make sure you hop over to mindandmachine.io.
Well, AI is the most overrated at the moment. I mean, there seems to be two totally different conversations in AI, and that's a bold thing. But right now, there's this conversation about AI is taking over fast, runways where things with AI passes human intelligence. There's that isn't conversation being done entirely by philosophers, and then there's a separate conversation by engineers and people who actually build this stuff. And there is really no connection between the two other than just speculation and extrapolation on a huge scale. AI is going to inform and reflect patterns, but at the same time, I don't actually believe AI will ever achieve consciousness. I think there's a definition of there's a semantic or definitional argument to be had there. I think like we had talked about, we will perceive it as conscious, but I don't think it will be. But I think AI is really a practical tool that will essentially become computing. It'll just be a part of what we think of as computing, but that a lot of these doomsday scenarios in AI are wildly overrated.
I would say you're kind of right, but the fact that you split the camps, the big problem I see is that most people who are technologically in the weeds are very willing to say that this is not a problem. But that also comes into question of the incentive problem. Are people who are researching something able to even understand or think about the fact that I may be creating the thing that's going to kill, wipe out, ruin all of us? And I would
Right.
argue no, because their jobs are against it, their families are against it, everything's against it. Your entire sense of identity.
Wait,
Do you think that when Pepsi was selling diabetes to kids, that the executives of Pepsi thought they were terrible
no,
people?
I
But they
think it's
still
totally
sold
different.
tons.
I think it's totally different because if you're actually building it and you know what AI is and what it does now, it is not plausible in any foreseeable future that it will catch and exceed human intelligence. Now, it may in some regards, certainly will in narrow sense. It has done that a long time ago, but it's if the thing that they're working on is not what we consider general intelligence, and certainly not human level general intelligence. And they don't see an extrapolation to that that's realistic. So I don't think, yeah,
I would
go
say
ahead.
before they invented the atomic bomb the day before, they said it was impossible.
But
The
no,
day
it was
after,
impossible, but they knew if they did it, what it would be. I mean, it always would be that thing.
and the reason why we don't understand is because we don't understand neuroscience well enough. But if we don't understand something, we're working in a I'll agree that if we work with traditional machine learning models, we're not going to get from here to there by increasing the power. It doesn't
Right.
work that way. But when you look at nature, when you look at systems, the stepwise functions don't happen from an increase in power.
Right.
They happen from a change in paradigm. What happens when you have a race where it is an all hands on deck, winner take all race? Do people push the envelope and not have necessary restrictions in place? There's no reason why a team has to
Right.
take the same approach that other teams are taking. I think that it's one of those situations where there's no reason not to contemplate the downsides because
Oh, of
we've
course.
effed up enough things without contemplating the downsides. I think the
Of course.
philosopher side of things is really important because the hardcore tech people are traditionally not interfacing enough with the neuroscience and philosophy people to have that more
Right, but they're not in the
nuanced
same
perspective.
conversation. Right, but they're not doing that. They're two separate conversations, it seems. But also,
Yeah, there's
to have
definitely yeah.
the winner take all danger scenario, you don't have to get anywhere close to general intelligence, general artificial intelligence. That's going to happen regardless. I agree with that completely. But that's not the same as this runaway scenario of AGI catching us and then immediately surpassing us because it's building itself from then on out. I mean, that's possible. I'm open to the possibility. I'm just skeptical of it. But that's the conversation being done about that is no way connected in any way to the conversation of what's actually happening in machine learning right now. So, and I don't think there's, while models are being used from neuroscience to build AI and machine learning right now, they're really crude and they're really, I mean, there's so much more mechanical. Again, we don't even fully understand neuroscience. And even what we do understand, it's a very crude analogy to it. And I just think it is pure sci-fi speculation at this point, which doesn't mean it can't happen, but that's the level of leap you have to take to connect the two. And I just don't think, I think one is very grounded and reality based in what's being done today, and the other is speculation on a fantasy level. Now, I think I think the conversations are fascinating and worth having, and I think the real benefit of them is what we learn about ourselves from the conversations about, AGI level artificial intelligence. I think they're important and valuable because they reflect on ourselves, right? If a machine is that powerful, then that it's human level intelligence, everything we learn about its behavior, we're learning about ourselves as well. So I think in like science fiction is often a way to put a mirror on ourselves that lets us talk about it without being as direct. So perhaps we can be more honest. The same thing is happening with the more philosophical AGI conversation.
I would agree with most of that. I would say typically when I see an entire group of people all say that something is not possible and not something worth worrying about, that makes me scratch my head a little bit.
Mm,
And the fact that that's what you see with most artificial intelligence researchers who are researching in the field, and that's the opposite of what you see for most artificial intelligence researchers who are focused on
mm.
safety and containment. It seems that when people get into the weeds of what could go wrong, there's enough to convince them there that that's worth focusing on versus the
Sure.
people just trying to build it.
But I don't see them saying it can't ever happen. I just see them saying, like, more
See almost all of
bewildered.
them
They're more
saying it happen, or
bewildered. What's that?
I see almost all of them saying it can't happen or saying, "Yeah, but not in our lifetime." This is not saying
Although that's not
they're
a good
saying
reason.
it's impossible in a lifetime. Yeah. No, they have horrible reasons,
I think
or
they're
they're not even
generally
the
bewildered,
question.
though. I'm sorry. I think they're generally bewildered at the question. It just seems so unrelated to the actual thing they're doing that they're just confused that this is a serious conversation.
But that's because they're scientists and idiot savants, so they're focused on one thing and one thing only. If you look at technology, almost all technologies that were black swan events, so to
Sure.
speak, you never that the dude who invented the radio wanted us to be able to listen to Jesus music and evangelicals,
Right.
and that was. And now today we have Spotify, and today we have podcasts, and today
Sure.
we have everything that we have. I don't think that I get that. I don't know.
No, I mean, I
When
think I'm open to the possibility. I mean, nobody can say it can't happen. Uh, and when you're looking out 100, 200, 300 years, I mean, you can't even have a conversation. That's so speculative at the rate things are changing. So I'm looking at, up to a say 50-year time window, and in that time window, it just doesn't seem plausible. Beyond that, I mean, if you look at what happened in the past 100 years, and then you think of extrapolate that on an exponential curve the next 100 years, there's just no way to have any serious conversation in 1, 2, 300 years out. So I tend not to.
you can't even have a serious conversation 50 years out. And I think that's what the people who are arguing that it could be a risk are arguing, is that
Yeah.
by the time that we realize it's a risk, our car's going so fast that it's already going over the cliff, no matter how
Right.
hard we hit the brakes.
Right. There are 2 points. One is you have to think about it before, because afterwards it's too late. And the other
Mhm.
is that in the way that the people, on the danger side connect it is just by pointing out the shape of an exponential curve, right? So the point is we can't anticipate that far out. So let's assume the worst and think about how to be ready for that. And that's a totally legitimate conversation. It's an essential conversation. So uh, it's
Yeah,
good that we point that out and we wrestle with those issues.
it is. I got two last questions for you, a controversial one and then an easy one. Before we wrap up, will AI, in terms of simple automation, be net positive or negative on jobs?
In terms of simple automation,
So driverless
I think it's going
car.
to be a net negative probably. I mean, you just look at the number. Just take transportation alone, which in many states here in the U.S. is the largest employer of men in the workforce. Autonomous driving just wipes that out, and then that's just one sector. So I don't see how it's not a net neg. Not I don't see how it could be anything other than a net loss of jobs.
How do we survive as a country, as antisocial as we are?
Well, and how little we're willing to confront it with serious conversation. It's gotten a little better, but I don't know how to understand how the last U.S. election was about immigration when the real problem is, in terms of jobs, is automation. So I don't know. I don't have the answer, but I think it's an immediate and urgent conversation.
If you guys were wondering, I'm too young to run for president, but August isn't. We got a chance there. I got one last question before you tell people where to find you and all the good stuff, and that is, if you had to leave people with one thing, a quote, a call to action, something to look into, a career to pursue, what would it be and why?
For young people or anyone in general?
Well, let's do a young people one, and then anyone in
Well,
general.
I'm not so sure it'd be that different. Um, I think in terms of making an impact and a difference and having the potential to make, a good return on a business, food sciences is a really important and very doable sector to dive into. We're looking at meat replacements are going to be radically important in terms of both health and environmental improvements. And that's totally doable. That's not like crazy speculative science. That's happening now. And there's so many opportunities. If you just look at some of the recent success stories in the food industry, the RX bars and Quest bars, these are just minor improvements, and they were radically successful businesses. You can, by mainstreaming some of the more fringe health and nutrition food science, I think you could build some really good businesses right now. The other thing that I would love to do if I were starting earlier is go into software, but software to improve our habits, because software right now is used largely to manipulate us and to make businesses that are super profitable, and in the process, creating negative habits. But there's no reason. In fact, software is beautifully designed and is entirely capable of enhancing and shaping our habits for the better. And I don't see enough of that. Like, I just think there's so much possibility to rewire sort of our instinctive behaviors through software with the right incentives. And so I would love to see more of that. And that's something that I wish I had the skills to develop.
I would agree. I would say the path to hell is paved in good intentions. I can give you all the right incentives in the world. I can cut out your sugar. I can make you sleep 8 hours by tying you to a bed. I can do all of these things. I think it always gets a little dangerous when we try to change people. And yet I think we may have to do that going forward because people have proven what they've wanted in a lot
Yeah,
of
but
ways,
I
and it's not
think
necessarily
you
what
give
they
people the
need.
choice. You got to give people the
You do,
choice.
but they've got to pay. You got to pay for it. So then you need a business model that works.
Yeah, but if you want to lose weight, if you want to have greater mental clarity, if you want to, these are outcomes worth paying for. They're not, it's not that hard of a sell if you can actually deliver.
Fair point. Fair point. Where can people find you and learn more, August?
Well, the Mind and Machine universe is all centered around the website, mindandmachine.io. From there, you can go to the YouTube channel, the podcast, and the newsletter. And that's sort of the hub of my exploration of all these topics and ideas.
And if you guys are checking this episode out, make sure to check out our one on biotech, genetics, human longevity enhancement, and all the good stuff over at Mind and Machine. Or if you go to the show notes, then we'll have links and everything there.
Great.
Until
Yeah,
next time, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I've just really enjoyed this. And, I love doing collaborations because we both interviewed a lot of people, and we have all this fragments of information coming in. So it's nice to be able to sit down and do a debrief and sort of try to make some sense out of all of it. So thanks, Matt.
Yeah, it's fun. And if you guys like this, leave a comment on the blog or on YouTube. What should I have asked August? What did I screw up? What did August screw up? I don't think he screwed up too much. Hopefully I got more screw ups on this one. That means swinging for the fences, but it was a fun one. And thanks for coming on and doing this.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, well, when you're talking about speculative science, you take your shot and you see what happens, and you just have to be humble and keep an open mind.
Yeah, Jordan missed the most shots. He just had the most game winners as well. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming on, guys. Thanks for coming with us. And share this with a friend. It's the most important thing that you can do for us. If you liked it, you want to give us a high five, a big hug, maybe like a butt grab or something, share this with a friend so that we can help grow this and build a movement where people are actually thinking about the future and hopefully building a better one because of it. Cheers.